Hello, you're listening to the Eric McKenna Project. Are you ready?
All right, friends, welcome to the Eric McKenna Project, and we are on show number 8, and I'm very happy to welcome in my guest tonight, Mr. Eric Hibler. Hib, as we're going to call him here tonight. Eric is a multi-skilled fighter. How about that one, huh? Multi-skilled fighter. He was also the owner of the Pittsburgh Fight Club for many years, too, and he's got one heck of a story. And thank you, sir. Good to have you on here.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate that.
Thank you for
We're going to try to get him a little closer to that microphone so we can get making sure the story's too good, my friend.
Okay.
So we got to make sure that our audience can hear. But again, thank you so much for coming on. Full disclosure here, I had never met Eric until recently, but the irony was that I had a business concern that was literally about a half mile down from you, and I saw kind of the appearance of your business over the years, and I would drive past it, and I was fascinated and probably should have walked in, and I just never did, so that's probably a missed opportunity on my behalf. But,
oh, definitely.
So we're going to get right into it. Hometown guy, right? From day one, you grew up in was it? You obviously went to Keystone Oaks School. Is that correct?
Yeah, I went to Keystone Oaks High School
Here in Pittsburgh. That's in Green Tree area. And what area?
No, actually, it's on the border. It's actually in Mount Lebanon, but
Is it?
It's right on the border of Mount Lebanon and Dormont.
Okay. And what town did you reside in?
I lived in Green Tree.
You're in Green Tree. All right. So fighting. It's probably not something that most kids actually, go outside of maybe little fisticuffs outside the schoolyard. How did you? Where did the interest first come to you?
I was getting in fights ever since I was a little kid. I mean, I'm a small guy, and somebody always had something to teach me or something about how I was small. So I never picked a fight in my life, I'll tell you that right now,
Right.
but I never backed down from anybody. So
Right,
I got in a lot of scuffles.
A lot of scuffles.
Yeah.
And what year did you graduate?
I graduated in 1982.
82. Okay. Now, when did you determine that fighting was going to be something you wanted to do on a legitimate basis?
When I was
Keep yourself out of trouble.
A little kid.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Was it boxing then? Was that the interest?
No, from the earliest memories I have, my neighbor, when I was like 5, was into studio wrestling, and my grandmother watched studio wrestling, and we watched Bruno Sammartino and Dominic DeNucci tag team and everybody, and then I'd go down the street and all the neighborhood kids, which I had a really nice neighborhood I grew up in, where there was kids all around my age, a little bit older, a little bit younger, and around my age, enough of them that we could all get together and wrestle in the front yards, and then I'd have a coach, the older kid down the street was the coach, Tommy Nodi, and he would make sure that we get into any real fights or anything with each other, because you get a little tense.
Well, sure. And that was what a lot of folks say, the golden era of wrestling, in the 70s.
Oh, I loved it when I was a little kid.
All those guys. And then I think the whole the pop culture kind of grabbed it in the 80s, and it became what it kind of is today. But yeah, there was man, I remember those days too. And the question I would have for you is, how did that transition into fighting? Because obviously studio wrestling, even when you're a kid, you do figure it out that it's fake, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I've had an interest in martial arts ever since I was a little kid. My parents let me watch whatever I wanted to watch. So I watched The Green Hornet, and I watched Kung Fu. When Kung Fu came on, I lost my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I was 7 years old, and I was like, this is what I'm doing. By the time I set goals when I was a little kid. I'm like, well, by the time I'm 21, I'm going to be a black belt. And after that, I'm going to have my first, professional fight. And then and I had it all staged out the way I was going to go through each system I was going to learn. I went to the YMCA, and I learned Shoin-ryu, and I went to a couple of different clubs.
In high school?
No, this is grade school.
Oh, get out. Okay.
I was like a little kid. Yeah,
okay.
I was like a little kid. I went around, and I played baseball, and I was outfielder and like a all-star baseball player and stuff like that. But it always felt like, I was stuck to a team, and I always had to lose when the team lost, and I only got to win when the team won. And even though I was like a star player and everything, it was always felt like I was held back from really being myself. And martial arts is like totally different than other types of organized sports. You were allowed to, like honestly, the traditional martial arts systems that were around, I still had to conform. And they called me gypsy, and they called me like everything under the sun.
Because you were learning different disciplines?
I jumped around from place to place to place to place to place. I didn't have any kind of, because I wanted to learn. I didn't want to be forced into doing a thing because that's what the instructor was good at. And I could tell that right away, right off the bat, that I needed to find people like that. That's when I found Don Guerin. He used to bring in like extraordinary talent from like all over the place. Right. He brought in Sir Chai Sursudi from Thailand, so I got to learn the Thai box. He brought in Eric Paulson from and with Danny Nasanto. Danny Nasanto was like Bruce Lee's best friend, and they brought in all the Jeet Kune Do disciplines that went into Jeet Kune Do. It was a bunch of different. There was a type of kickboxing, a type of hand trapping, which was like my favorite thing ever.
Right.
And then Kali, which was stick and knife and very similarly oriented. And all these styles were not available anywhere around here. Everybody around here did, basic traditional types of martial arts. And I competed in those like types of
like Tang Soo Do or Taekwondo or
Kempo. Or
Kempo is a karate, correct? A form of karate.
Yeah, it's a Chinese karate.
Okay. As opposed to Korean, where I guess that's Tang Soo Do.
Or Japanese.
Okay.
Yeah, and I had a black belt in Shotokan, which was a Japanese type of karate.
Okay.
And they were all cool, but when Don brought in people, he brought in guys that were experimenting with mixed martial arts, and they were doing their full contact stick fighting, and they were doing.
This is in the 80s you're talking about, or the late 70s?
This is this is in the 80s.
Okay.
It's like before I was out of high school. I mean, I was
early
probably
80s.
like late high school. I was probably, I can't say, maybe I was like 18, 19 years old or something like that. I was really like into it by then. And the exposure I got, I realized at that point, I was like, wow, there's people out there that think way bigger than that just gets demonstrated to me locally. Not that locally, like, we had the best wrestling, we had the best boxing, we had the best, like, toughest people, period. But it just didn't seem as expansive as, like, the JKD people from California. Like, Bruce Lee's mind had infected, Danny Nasanto and all these other people, and they would bring in all this knowledge and all this diversity. So there was just no comparison. And Don would bring these people in. He'd have big seminars.
Where's Don's school at?
He was out in McMurray.
Okay.
And his school was beautiful. It was like nobody else's place either. You would go in there. It was 2 stories. They had a big deck, observation deck, where parents could come in and watch people, watch their kids train.
Right.
They had fight teams. And their fight teams, I mean, I remember living through this, but I've seen even video where their fighters in competition, they would have to win so resoundingly, like in a scoring system, they would have to outscore the other opponent like 4-1 or 5-1 every time just to get considered to win, because they were so dominant.
Got it.
And they were so dominant because of Bill Edwards. And Bill Edwards, they called him the Sarge. He was like a legend. He was like the Black Bruce Lee. And him and Don, they would break down everything that they learned, and they would put it into their competitive sport karate, and they just dominated completely. And that was evident because I was in other little schools that tried to compete against them, and it was just, that's why I ended up going down to Oakland. I used to go to the top of Kang's Karate, where all the fighters went, and it was just sort of like a no man's land where you just went down there and you sparred freely without any school affiliation or anything like that. We just went down there and fought, and Kang's just
so it was open,
hosted it. And it was a couple of brothers that were down there, and I mean brothers, not like someone's relation.
Right.
It was a couple of bros.
Right.
And they would set it all up, and they were very responsible and very I don't know, they just had very good disciplinary like how to control everybody and how to keep a good discipline going on in a wild situation like that, where we were trying to learn how to fight full contact, and it was just a way for me to.
Was that innovative then at that time? Because obviously that wasn't going on anywhere else, right?
No, that's why I was down there, because it wasn't going on anywhere else unless you were outside of this area, the immediate area, and honestly, people like wanted to do these types of things, but it just wasn't like publicly acceptable. Like it just, if you hurt people, you lost business. If you had a bunch of guys that were like fanatical, like you sort of separated them from everybody else, and then they just sort of stayed with themselves and beat each other up or whatever. And there wasn't any kind of like dissemination where everybody like tried to improve that way. Everybody thought they were doing that because that's how that was marketed to them and sold to them.
Right.
But it wasn't. I mean, when I was in high school, we used to go around to like all the karate places and challenge the instructors, like the guys that ran the place, and they'd be like, "Wow, look at my book here. Here's me lifting a car. Here's me."
So it was marketing then, right?
Yeah, and
on their end.
That's cool. How about we just rock it out and see who's bad, And they'd be like, "Oh, you're gonna have to leave."
Really?
Like, okay, yeah.
So this was upsetting. Let me tell you my thoughts as to what my experience was as a consumer in terms of martial arts. I think probably there's some good schools and there's probably some not so good schools, but I think there's an element of recruiting and system in place, and there's a certain things they need to do to make their money. So I've always felt there was an underlying marketing vibe there that...
which is fair. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that,
You're right.
honestly.
I get it, and everybody needs to make money. I understand it completely.
And survive at a very hard business. It's tough.
Competitive. Right.
It's tough.
Right. But what you're describing, if I'm hearing it correctly, is this was almost no holds barred. It was also blended disciplines.
That's what they called it back in the day.
Okay. And it was blended disciplines, right? I mean, you were taking bits and pieces. So where were you, did you have an initial discipline in the beginning? Where were your black belts at when you were young? What disciplines were they? Or were there any?
Well, me personally, or just everybody that I was...
You personally.
Me personally, I had a little bit of boxing background. I had a wrestling background from high school. I had some karate, different types of karate backgrounds. I grew up going to the Y and learning different types of karate. There were schools all over the place to go and get, like basic traditional type of training. But traditional types of training were always based around, they broke it down into forms or weapons forms or some type of sparring. And you had to learn compulsory type katas and forms and so forth in order to demonstrate other things that were important, like discipline and dedication and the ability to take orders and understand how to respect rank and stuff like that. And they established, it turned people into martial artists instead of being like monkeys at the zoo, which is pretty much what you are if you don't have any kind of order to things or any type of hierarchy set in place, which was necessary in order to educate people, in order to help them be able to see the long, it's not like you go in and then it's 3 months it's over. For a lot of people it is, they quit. But if you were dedicated and you wanted to learn what the value of it was, there were lessons physically, mentally, and emotionally all the way through. It's how I grew up. And how it formed my personality. My whole persona is based on my martial arts. I mean, martial arts educated me. Martial arts built my whole psyche.
To me, it was always a deep dive inward, in a way that you may not get in just regular society.
You're correct. Like when you would go to school and kids didn't exhibit the same things, I used to think to myself, especially Eastern philosophy, I would be like, why don't we learn this in school? Why is this not important? It seems like everything is so sport and aggression based at school, and then when I go to karate, where we're learning to fight, everything's cerebral and more discipline. It's all about discipline. It's all about respecting other people and learning to be able to do something dangerous at a high level and not maul each other, you know, which is, I was getting in fights all the time when I was young. Anybody, I used to follow kids that were older than me that got in fights, and I would study them, watching how they reacted, how they dealt with other kids, you know, and I got in some huge scuffles when I was young, and I got to see a lot of that, and I admired a lot of those kids, but at the same time I could see the difference between discipline and respect and actual raw talent and ability in a fist fight. And I had to try to like meld those things together, you know, mentally, to understand like what the difference is between a street fighter and then somebody who was skillful at a higher level. And there were things that I respected out of both worlds, but at the same time, they were definitely not the same
worlds
thing.
apart.
Yeah, they're not the same thing.
Did you look at, even when you were young, because you were going through all the disciplines under the formal training that you were doing, did you think that what you saw in terms of whether the fights you were engaged in or whatever, did you see a lot of just undisciplined behavior? Did you, because oftentimes, I will tell you from my limited experience with karate, but I noticed that, how would I say this? I looked at life differently too. I looked at the way people thought, their thought processes, whether it was a negotiation in business while this was going on. It changed the way I viewed life. I almost looked at the people on a more conceptual basis on decision making. And I thought that it really helped me in business and helped my thought process and helped me to be calmer in circumstances where I wasn't. But it was really interesting to see, wow, I was probably like that guy
exactly.
a year or two prior.
Exactly.
You know, so I think there's a lot of benefits to martial arts to go way beyond the actual physical doing it. I think it's a mental thing too. So, but you obviously took all these different disciplines and then you went to the fighting. So how did that happen? I mean, were you just not getting enough
like
at the discipline you were training at the moment? Did you want something else?
No matter where I was training or no matter what I was learning, like in the back of my mind, I knew what it was like to get in street fights all the time because I did. So to me, I was like, when do we get to the fighting part? Let's fight now. Like, okay, that's all cool. I understand like the meaning of life or whatever. Let's fight now and let's see who comes out on top, and then let's really like measure out the measure of our own inner toughness or whatever. Just why I was that way. I have no idea. That just would seem to be to me like an element that was just sort of skipped around upon all the time instead of just like focusing on like when I would read Book of the Five Rings or something and Musashi's laying out like all systems are bullshit and all school training is crap. It's all about you knowing yourself, you training yourself, you understand. And when you go to battle, you go to battle. There's no talking. There's no my school is this better than your school. It's like it's you and the other guy, and how well thought out you are, how well trained you are, how much confidence you have in yourself, and how willing you are to apply the things that you've learned all the way, not with restraint or any kind of anything, so that you could have something tangible that was, just solid. And not to put down any of those other processes. For me, I just needed to know like what was beyond the
formal.
It's just like there was rules, and rules are meant to be broken and or bent enough that you can have some kind of leeway so you can see on the other side of the veil or whatever, and look into the. So
this was obviously part of your life as a grade school and a high schooler, and you graduate high school, and there's a gap there, 5-6 years before the late '80s come. And was it Garen? What was the gentleman's name? Don.
No, I knew Don. I knew Don from the time I was in high school.
Okay.
Like I said, his school was the local famous fighting school. There was a PK.
So you were going there since high school then?
Well, I didn't go there. I just knew of him.
Okay.
Like he had a place he was affiliated with in Dormont, which was run by Kevin Pagnotta, and he had another place that was out in the North Hills that was run by, I think, I'm going to get this name wrong. I'm not even going to say. There was another place out in the North Hills, and they were all the 3 PKAs, and they had the most progressive, like, sparring, and even still, like, now, like, if you looked at it nowadays, it's just like karate, sport karate is all they were doing. It's just their sport karate, like, they could throw combinations like boxers, and they could...
It was blended more.
Yeah,
right?
they hit each other hard. Like, the first time I started to spar with Sarge's fight team, his actual team, I couldn't believe, like, how aggressively these guys were hitting me and trying to beat the crap out of me. And, you know, it forced my wrestling to come out of me, and it forced, you know, I was like, wow, this is not like what I'm used to. This is more like what I'm interested in.
Sure.
You know, this is more full contact. And then I saw Thai boxing for the first time, and it, like,
Muay
blew
Thai?
my mind.
Was it Muay Thai?
Yeah, Muay
Yes,
Thai.
yeah. So I was exposed to that a couple of years into my training. I just went and observed it, and I was horrified. I couldn't believe. To me, it was pretty violent.
Oh,
You know, it was very, very violent, and
but it was real, and it was solid, and there's no...
And that's where, and
nothing's
I think
pulled.
that's where I was shocked, because with Tung Soo Do, the discipline that I trained under, it was, you know, sparring was sparring. You weren't there to physically hurt the other.
You were there to learn.
Correct. But I saw these guys just really going at it, and I had a friend of mine who was also at a Tung Soo Do discipline as well, a different school, and he joined this Muay Thai school for a while, and he just couldn't take it. The physical pain was so much that it just wasn't for him. It just wasn't for him. But I remember seeing that is really beautiful. And then I was watching some ESPN, probably ESPN2, watching some of the fights on there. And I just could not get over how brutal it was. So that was my first exposure to traditional karate, to, I guess, you know, actual combat. So, and I get the lure. I do get the lure, but it does come with a price.
Oh, it comes with big. I mean, when I got certified as a Thai boxing instructor when I was out of high school, and on my test day, like when I was tested for my black belt, they literally tested me for 4 hours, and they were making up stuff to try to make me choke, and it was nothing to me after I went out and trained with the Sarge and these other full contact fighters, and I tested at Don Guerin's place for the American Muay Thai Association or whatever it was, something like that, and it was Chai's organization, and we had to go through all these pad drills, which were exhausting, Thai pad drills, to test your cardio, to test your ability, you know, hand combinations and leg, a lot of leg kicking and so forth. And then after that, you had to fight a couple of Thai boxers, and they brought in...
I mean, after all that exposition...
After you're exhausted.
Right.
Because now it's not about whether you have any energy left. It's all about how much, you know, and how much you got. Like, what do you got? And they bring in these pros, and they would just beat the shit. I mean, excuse me.
We're okay with that on this show.
Okay. Well, they would just beat you.
Right.
They kicked me so bad in the legs, and I just ate it.
The shins,
I was like,
right? It's the shins?
Yeah, oh yeah. And it's horrifically painful because they're aiming for the nerves that run up and down the side of your legs. Your muscles, when they would hit your muscles, it would be bone pinching nerve against bone.
Wow.
And smash it, and then smash your muscles after that because you couldn't get out of the way. And I'd be in a pile. They literally carry me out to the car, put me in the back seat of the car, and my friends drove me home, and I couldn't walk. I couldn't walk for a week.
But you loved it.
Oh, I was like, I am king. I showed that dude. You know, I tried to rip his head off.
That's because you're wired a little differently than the average Joe.
I was a psycho. I was a little psycho.
So just so I can understand the timeline to a degree. So to support your love of all this, did you hold any other jobs in the 80s at all in terms of...
I had my own window cleaning business.
Okay.
I taught martial arts. That's what I've been doing most of my life. I had private lessons, and I started teaching when I was 17.
Wow. Holy smokes. So,
yes, I've been ahead since, I was a kid.
But the Guerin School, though, was definitely ahead of its time, wouldn't you say? I mean, at least obviously in Western PA.
Yeah, it was ahead of its time because they were bringing in alternative viewpoints, and they were pushing the envelope because in this area that didn't exist. And in California, Bruce Lee brought that into effect in the 60s and late 60s and early 70s. And they had gone through several generations already of guys trying to become more and more sophisticated at full-on out fighting. And they had there's different phases of this as it got more extreme, as it got more diverse, as they strayed away from things that they were surmising versus this is what's really ending up happening. And there's an evolution that it had to go through. By the time it got to us, by the time I started doing it, it was still a lot of relating to boxing, relating to Thai boxing, relating to Filipino stick and knife fighting. So they were kind of mixing. That's why I taught a type of like executive blends where people weren't getting destroyed. Later on, when Eric Paulson started to come, who's a famous MMA trainer to this day, runs Combat Submission Wrestling, CSW, in Orange County out in California. He started to come, and he was learning at the Inosanto Academy out in California in what's the name of it? Something Del Rey. I can't think of it right off the top of my head. But anyways, he was like their star boy, and he was going around training with different Gracies and going over to Raw and training with Rico Chiapparelli and some other like famous like NCAA wrestlers and stuff that had their own kind of like things going on. And then he would come to Pennsylvania, and he was fighting in Japan.
Okay.
Shoot fighting in Japan, which was
What is shoot fighting?
Shoot fighting it started out as kind of like Japanese martial arts mixed with studio wrestling. Because studio wrestling in Japan is like different than it is here. Like,
right.
In Japan, they would have these fights. I used to watch these on TV all the time too when I was a kid because they were just insane. Like they looked like they were doing studio wrestling, and it was a work. Like they were working it, but at the same time, they were like unloading on each other, like, with full leg kicking and shots to the head and picking each other up and slamming each other. And they had tag teams where they were doing that. And it was super exciting. Well, real shoot fighting spawned out of that when they started mixing with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and they had Sambo influence and Thai boxing influence coming in.
That's what Sambo is? I've heard of that before.
Sambo is like it's like a Russian judo and wrestling mix. They wear a gi, they have a belt, but they just have they don't have like gi pants on. They have like normal wrestling singlet on. And they wear shoes. And it's super sophisticated and super, came from like the Cossacks and stuff like that. Were like developing all these different wrestling styles that were similar to judo, but it's way more brutal than judo. So they brought that to Japan. A guy named Sayama, they call him Super Tiger. The Super Tiger took certain guys, Yuri Nakamura for one, who was the guy that moved that to the Inosanto Academy and was training Eric, and put these guys in real fights. And they started a league over there, a shoot fighting league, and then Eric went over there and he won the world title like back to back, like a couple of times. And he defeated, with Yuri training him, whoever the champion was. Eric snapped his leg.
Wow. And
Eric's like, he was on extreme fighting, like when the first time you ever saw extreme fighting on TV, Eric was fighting, Pat Miletich was fighting, like all these people that I respected, they were in these actual fights, and it was like the UFC before the UFC existed. They called it extreme fighting because at that time, like every gym was extreme gym or extreme.
That was late
training.
80s?
Yeah. I got hit in the head a lot.
You're doing pretty well. And that's, I think, where I want to try to bridge the time frame here, because
Oh, you're going to be up against a wall.
No, that's okay.
Because I don't
well,
know.
MMA obviously is so huge and has been so huge. I think, quite frankly, that's the reason why traditional boxing seems to have been faded out of existence almost, for the most part, at least in the heavyweight division or the light heavyweight division. It seems like there's those iconic figures that were in the 80s and 90s are no longer there. And maybe there's other factors involved possibly too in that, but MMA certainly became a thing. And I can remember early 90s, mid 90s when it started, and I can't tell you the name of the two leagues. There was something called K1. Remember
That's kickboxing.
I remember seeing that when I was training in the late 90s. K1 was a thing, and I actually watched I think I watched one or two of those. That was more of a taekwondo kind of thing, right?
Oh, it's like it's like it's kickboxing, like without Thai boxing rules. Like there was no there's no clinching, there's no throwing. It's just kickboxing, but they're the best kickboxers, you know.
And that's still a thing? K1's still a thing?
Well, honestly, I don't know if they still have. I know they have different types of promotions, and I don't know if it's necessarily called K1 anymore or not, or if that exact organization still, like, I know that organizations like Pride and K1 and Golden, what's the one that is now? Ryzen right now is like the big thing.
Okay.
With Tension, what the heck is his name? There's a Japanese guy that Floyd Mayweather just knocked out.
Okay.
He went to Japan, and they had like intentions. I mean, he's sick, and they thought, oh, he's gonna show Floyd Mayweather what's up, and da da da. And meanwhile, Floyd's like twice his size, and he like looks at this kid, and he's like, oh, you're open. That's the end of that. That was the end of Tension. He was undefeated until Floyd like just destroyed him.
Right. But you actually were in it, and you saw the evolution of MMA, the start of it, and you saw the evolution of it.
From the grassroots up, man. I was fighting in barns and...
Let's talk about that. I mean, so when did you, in your life, or roughly speaking, when did you start fighting professionally?
Well, I got a call from a promoter named Jamie Levine. He lived in Florida, and he promoted for World Extreme Fighting. And World Extreme Fighting at the time was like the new up-and-coming MMA thing. It was after the Ultimate Fighting Championship had started, but was kind of like on the rocks in the late 90s. They were trying to get their bearing, trying to get public acceptance. Mm-hmm. I mean, we used to go to shows, and the police would show up and raid the show, you know, and like try to arrest everybody.
Was this deemed just violent and just it was...
It was, it wasn't
acceptable.
Well, it just wasn't, the public just wasn't ready for guys to, like, hold each other down on the ground and, like, beat each other up. That's basically, like, when this guy called me, he said, hey, we got a fight coming to the Civic Center in West Virginia, in...
Charleston.
No, not Charleston.
Wheeling
Civic Center. And he said... we heard that you guys like to fight. We've tried to get these other Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu places and stuff around to, no offense against Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because I love it, but they didn't want to punch each other on the ground. They said, do you have any problem with...
Originally.
Yeah, like, well, they did back in the day. Like, they didn't do that. They worked the guy, tired him, and then...
Traditional Jiu-Jitsu.
Well, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Okay.
Like, they dealt with people punching, but they just... It wasn't sophisticated. Like if you watch Hoist Gracie fight back in the day, he doesn't have a clue as to how to fight on his feet. He doesn't have to. He'd get in close, snuff the other guy, get a hold of him. Once you got a hold of him, he's like an anaconda. I mean, you can get rid of him. Mm-hmm. I wrestled him too, and I used to think, whenever I get my chance, I'm going to show him. You know, and I wrestled. It was like wrestling plasma. I mean, he was really good. I wrestled him for 2 days straight, 6 hours a day, no breaks, no nothing. Just me and him, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, which was exhausting. It was the only time that my stomach muscles ever cramped. When we went to dinner, my stomach muscles cramped so hard that I couldn't eat. They just locked from like dealing with his constant assaults. But I'd get him in rear naked chokes and like all different kinds of like I had him, and he would still get out of it, and I was like, wow,
So the hype was real then.
You're really slick,
the
like
Gracies.
on another level. And I already had catch background and shoot background, and I had all different kinds of grappling background to flip him cards that he wasn't used to, and I think that's why he liked me. I wasn't, we had very friendly roles and everything like that, but it was definitely it was an experience to learn from him because he was really good and he was really skillful. He rolling with Hickson and his family is just ridiculously skillful, all of them, and they're all super tough. I mean, I used to watch Gracie's in action, like where they had a couple of videotapes and they'd show lions like taking down zebras, and then they'd show the Gracie's fighting, and you're like, oh, so bad.
And I think the average sports fan was aware of the Gracies. I mean, just a casual sports fan would hear it because we'd see it, and there was an exposure there. And obviously that name obviously helped launch. Would you not agree? Would you mixed martial arts? I mean, in the beginning.
Yeah, they're the ones that started the ultimate.
What was the name of the organization in the beginning? It wasn't MMA, or MMA is a discipline, right?
They called it No Holds Barred.
No Holds Barred.
I even have shirts that have say NHB. Everybody said NHB all the time, and then I can remember that this promoter came to me and he said, "Don't say that anymore." And I was like, "Why?" And he's like, "Because it's like barbaric." He goes, we're going to say mixed martial arts because it's all different types of martial arts together. And we have to get rid of the stigma of being like barbaric because we're fighting like this. So I immediately, everybody was like, okay, because we want to continue and have a career and be able to do this. So it was marketing all the way, MMA instead.
So there were circuits around the country that did, fighters would fight and then move up in, because obviously the pay-per-views were the thing that introduced it to society. The pay-per-views became a thing that kind of replaced the boxing pay-per-views. It was the next progression of it,
right? And
it was the fighting in the octagon. It was the octagon was like the thing, right? But I remember this being prevalent in the mid '90s and then late '90s, but we started to hit its stride. Now, was there multiple organizations that were fighting against each other or competing against each other?
No, there was like the WEF, the UFC, and Pride, and that was it.
Okay, there's three then.
Yeah, and Pride was only in Japan.
Okay,
the UFC was dying in this country, and the WF was just like the underground swell coming up. Like all the guys that were fighting in the league that when I was in this league were like Jamie was going around the country, going to every little place that he could find to find talent. The guys were really slick and really willing to, get in and rock and roll like on full bore, and then he would invite them. Like when we got invited, we went down to Wheeling, West Virginia. He threw us to the Lions. It was like, okay, you're gonna fight. Like here's our champion at 155 pounds. You're gonna fight that guy. Here's our champion at 185 pounds. You're gonna fight that guy.
Wow!
And they just like threw us in, but we did really well. And we did not get punked like whatsoever. Like we hung tough. And he was like, "Wow, you guys are incredible. Would you like consider like signing contracts and like doing this?" And we were like, "Yeah, like hell yeah, hell yeah." Like the first fight I went to was in New Orleans, and when I walked in, it was a who's who of everybody that I'd ever heard about, and everybody.
That'd be exciting, huh?
It was just I was like starstruck. I was just standing there like, there's Frank Shamrock over there, and there's Maurice Smith over there.
There's a name I haven't heard in a while. Or Ken Shamrock.
Well, Ken Shamrock was his brother.
Right, the younger brother, right?
Yeah, and Frank was the younger brother.
Oh, Frank was the younger one.
Yeah,
okay.
He was the younger one.
Okay.
But they were fighting in Japan. They were fighting for. Oh my God, what were they? The name? They had their own thing. There was another like type of pancration. They were fighting pancration in Japan, and which was basically very similar to the shoot fighting. Like they were looked like studio wrestling, except it was real. Like they were fighting for real. They were picking each other up and slamming each other, and they were kicking and punching each other, and they were trying to submit each other. And the submission game in Japan it wasn't Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu type of submission, because that's what ultimately.
Which is what? Explain it to the layman. Like if you tap out, do you?
Well, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. it's like let me explain the dynamics. They grab a hold of you. They latch onto you. This is back in the day, by the way. It's not how it is now because everything evolves. But back in the day, they would latch onto you, and like a boa constrictor, they would just start to shut off your options to escape, shut off your options to breathe, shut off your options to exist anymore until you gave up. You either passed out or had something broken or you tapped out. Like that's where tapping came, like a major thing, became a major thing. Because then people realized, hey, we could train this really hard and go to the point where something's going to break and then tap out. And it was the rule or the accepted way of doing things was you stopped. You didn't hurt the other guy. You could brutalize him as much as you want, but you didn't break his limb.
Until he's tapping.
Because you got to be able to continue to train. And training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is everything. It was just training. And whereas shoot fighting, since it came from Sambo and had a faster game, it's more like wrestling, and it had the studio wrestling showmanship. Like if you weren't a bad show, like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is boring as shit. The two guys get on the ground, they roll around. If you didn't know what was going on, it's like going to a wrestling match, when you've never watched wrestling. You have no idea is he winning? Or like, what's happening? Right. It's over? Like, nobody knew what was going on. Well, in shoot fighting, it was a totally different thing. I mean, it was a show. Yeah, like they got up, they rock and rolled, and they hit the ground. They went from, they did all their submissions and combinations, so that you could tell really what was happening, and they did dramatic dive rolls into things, and it put all the cool really into ultimate fighting, and that's what that influence helped jack up the people's interest level from a layman's
interest.
Yeah,
level,
because they could all of a sudden it was like they
there
could see
was some
what's
showmanship
happening.
in it as well too.
Yeah, like watching boxing or kickboxing, and there's enough excitement to keep it going. When they hit the ground, it wasn't boring. They were still moving and changing directions and trying dramatic submissions on each other, and some of the Japanese takes on things were really cool. They were interesting and they were fun to watch, and it was easy to get into, and you could see how this could turn into what it is today, which is just a further extension of that.
The concept of the cage, what year roughly did that come out?
That was day one with the Ultimate Fighting Championship. They made the octagon cage because people in Japan would fall through the ropes. If they just had a mat, like in wrestling, that people would go off the edge of the mat. They said this giant platform that they called the sabakai was the original, they have different disciplines come in and fight each other on this big platform, and these guys would fight each other on this big circular platform, just like I did when I was in high school on our amphitheater. That's what we pretended it was the sabakai stage.
Right.
It was the same thing, big giant concrete circle, and we would fight on that. If you fell off the circle, and people did. People fell off the circle all the time, so they got tired of that, so they just put a cage around it. You could still see through the cage. Back in the day, too, the cage was, 7 feet tall.
Okay.
So there was the biggest guys could, be completely held inside the cage. When they had lower cages, people would hook on to the cage just out of survival instinct. They would try to hook on their arms onto the cage or any way they could hold on to the cage. So they had to come up with all the rules that dictated what went on inside the cage environment.
That makes sense.
So that everybody would be on an even playing field. Like when I started fighting, it was the reason they called it no holds barred was because no holds were barred. The only thing you weren't allowed to do was fish hook, which is you rip the cheek apart, and they didn't want you to do that. They didn't want you to hit the groin, and they didn't want you to poke the guy in the eyes. Everything else was up to interpretation. And it made it, we had these gloves. They were Harbinger gloves, 4 ounces, and we cut the knuckles so it was just like the UFC gloves are now. We cut the hands down so that it was just your knuckles were covered, and that was it. You had free motion in your hands. You could still wrestle, but you could still almost like it was just padded bare knuckle boxing. And you could hit the other guy as hard as you want. You didn't have to necessarily worry about breaking your hand, which is the whole point of wearing a boxing glove in the first place. Not to protect the other guy, it's to protect your hands from breaking so that you can continue to fight.
There would be no
after
fight. Right.
Like you would be out of a career like real quick. So they had these little tiny gloves, and they hurt real bad when you got hit with them, but they at least provided you enough protection that you didn't cut the other guy as readily. You didn't didn't beat up your hands as bad as if you were doing it with just wraps on. You wrap it and then put the little glove
So it's interesting to hear the reality of why the octagon was created, but at the same time, the octagon, the cage, added a level of interest and, I don't know, hardcore to the public.
Yeah, it was animalistic to the public.
It became now. And I will tell you, it turned me off. I'm being blunt.
Turned a lot of people off.
It turned me off because it was being marketed that way in the 90s anyways, just so they had the combination of the boxing announcer and your pro wrestling announcer as they would advertise these pay-per-views and in the cage, and it just seems so just very over the top brutal. And I think that I was one of those folks who was like, I'm not going to watch that. Now I did ultimately over time. I got lured. I got lured in.
They sported it, more and more and more. How to say that they increased the sport aspect
element of it.
it.
Absolutely right. Yeah. And now is that? Do you feel that what aided that possibly was other disciplines coming in, like stars from other disciplines joining, like a traditional boxing?
Well, they wanted Olympic athletes to
Right.
be interested. They
Right.
wanted real, professional boxers and kickboxers and
NFL players wanted some of those NFL players wanted, right?
I mean, honestly, people have been fighting and beating each other up since the beginning of time because they put it on a stage. I mean, that's not the first time that they ever did that. That was just the most recent, money shove that they did in order. They were already doing that in Brazil for 80 years prior to that. This is the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu came from. It wasn't just spawned overnight, and then they had this giant contest. I mean, it was like a generational thing. And then in this country, you have wrestling and boxing and people going to county fairs and beating each other from the
Right.
beginning of this country,
Right.
that's and there's plenty of hardcore tough Midwestern people that grow up on farms and that have no problem with fighting tooth and nail.
That was a Friday night event, probably
yeah.
down at the local barn.
Oh heck yeah! Or outside the bar is
absolutely right. And I think
it was to make it professional. They wanted to make it professional sport in order to attract an audience to build it into what it is today. And that was the necessary process that it had to go through. It just had to.
A little aside, I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts, and we don't have to spend much time on this, but I'm just really interested to hear your thoughts on professional wrestling. In that, as it exists today, 15, 20 years ago, there was an organization called ECW, Extreme Championship Wrestling, and I'll be honest with you, I had a couple of friends that were really into it. I got taken to a couple of events down at the convention center, actually. 2 events, to be honest with you. One of my friends locally here knew one of the wrestlers was based out of Beaver in that era. The name will come to me in a second, but when they would come to town, they would hire my friend, who was a big, stocky guy, to catch a couple of the Dudley brothers or something. The point was, it was very over the top. It was something it was hardcore. It was things I'd never seen before. Like they were throwing tacks on the middle of the floor and then slamming people on nails and tacks and things where there was blood. It was
To generate excitement.
very much so. So, and I know a couple young professional wrestlers. They're good friends of mine, and they're working the circuit, and it's a husband-wife team, and sometimes they're together in the same conference, and sometimes they're not. They've actually had a couple roles on WWF, I believe. They've been to Japan, the whole thing. They're trying to break, and listening to them and just talking with them, it really, from my perspective as an outsider looking in, there's a lot of risk. A lot of real physical combat in the show, so to speak. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, it's like full contact choreography. I mean,
in some ways, that seems even harder to me.
And they're sacrificing. Well, I'll tell you what. It's not necessarily harder. It's two sides of the same coin or whatever. The fact that you have to give yourself up to sacrifice in order to perpetuate the illusion of the show, and the show must go on. So you have you have to damage yourself or be willing to risk damaging yourself. Like, I'm friends with Kurt Angle, and I mean, some of the abuse that even Kurt took as an Olympic athlete at the highest pro level as a professional wrestler is brutal. I mean, they like brutalized him. And he could take it. His neck is like as big as my both of my legs. I used to call him Son of Zeus because his neck is just ridiculous. I've never even seen anyone with a neck like it.
Right.
And his all his mad wrestling, Olympic wrestling skill and so forth. It's still like the job is sell the show. Sell the show at your own personal. Is it a storyline?
Is it a storyline?
Oh yeah, there's a storyline. It's a work. Like it's a choreography of, like, here's what could happen. Here's what we're gonna do. Here's how it plays out. Here's who wins. Here's who takes the most abuse. Here's the moves that we expect you to pull off. And then it's like stuntmen. Literally, they're stuntmen. It's like stuntmen
very dangerous
at the highest level. Like, sacrifice yourself to get the excitement level to drive through the ceiling. And if you can come off the top rope and do a double backflip and then knee the guy in the head on the way to the ground and then hit the ground and then do a dramatic roll and then pull off some catch wrestling submission, and then the crowd goes crazy. If you can do that with the build-up of you stole his girlfriend, and they could draw people in like soap operas in order to draw people in. I mean, that's a fine art to be able to do. That's why everybody isn't a professional fighter. Everybody isn't a professional wrestler. It takes you have to be mega talented. You have to have resiliency to be able to pay your dues. Like, you gotta pay your dues to be a professional wrestler. And,
no doubt.
What is my opinion of it? I think it's like anything. It's an art form. It requires special people with special gifts to be able to do that and to survive it. And anybody that you look at that has survived, that you look at guys that are retired now, a
lot of them are cripples.
They're in bad shape psychologically.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them commit suicide.
I think of Jake the Snake Roberts. I mean, that's a shame to see the condition he's in now.
And even the risks that they take, even after they're damaged, just so the crowd's like, yeah, it drives them to.
What about that guy, Mankind? I remember seeing him 20 years ago, and I couldn't believe it. He was not what you would say a muscular, or didn't appear to be a big in shape guy.
But he was a great actor, though.
But just seeing some of the risks that they would build these huge cages that were looked like they were 2 stories high, and to see him fall through that on his back and
take it. It's a testament
onto
to
nails
his
and tacks and staples and things. It's just it's and again, I think what the public doesn't realize too is there's a whole field out there of stunt men and stunt women that do things for the movies, which those folks are got to be incredible athletes and taking incredible risks.
They are, and they are getting hurt just as much.
I bet, but
there's a camaraderie though that goes with that. Just like a fighter, the stuntmen are exactly the same way. They're every bit as brave, every bit as tough, every bit as creative, and it's an art form for them too, and their pride is on the line every time that they want it to be the best to come out, so when somebody goes back and sees what they've done on film, they want to be like, wow, that's amazing. Like, not every person could pull off those types of things and have the resiliency to make a living at it.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And most of the stunt people in Hollywood, from my understanding, are just vastly underpaid for the risk they take.
Oh yeah. I worked with the 8711 stunt team when they came in for the Warrior movie downtown, and they lived with me, trained with me every day for like 6 months. And their talent level of the main stunt guys was just ridiculous. I mean, they're some of the most talented people I ever came in contact with. And their resiliency, like they would in practice, we'd go over things, but when it was time to shoot, it would be like, okay, I'm going to scorpion off the top of this. You just try to break me in half. And like they were like fully, just like fighters, like fully committed.
It's hardcore.
And we were making an MMA movie, so they were like, kill me this way or kill me that way. And they would go at it full bore. And you had to get up and do it again. And then shoot. Oh, stop, take that. Do it again. And the director didn't even necessarily understand that they were, like, they just expect them to be sacrificed. As soon as you can't cut it, they cut you and they get somebody else that can do it. So you're under that gun all the time. It's do or die all the time. You got to respect that like there's no tomorrow.
Excuse me. Yeah, I think of myself dropping off a rope into a bed of tacks. Yeah, it'll enough to give me a cough. I've never understood. There was a guy named New Jack that was a wrestler in that ECW years ago, and I went to the convention center, and just to see this guy jump off of like an extension ladder onto tables, excuse me, it was mind-numbing to me. And I'm literally like, a couple rows back watching that, thinking to myself, I don't know what they were paid. Probably not a ton of money.
No, like next to nothing.
Yeah, but the risk alone was just incredible. And they'd also land. Sometimes they would land and they would lay there like motionless. You didn't know if that was part of the whole act or were they really hurt.
I think sometimes it was and sometimes it wasn't.
Or a combination of the two,
yeah,
right?
Well, Well, the Kurt came in one day to practice and he had a hole in his hip and a piece of cloth sticking out of it. And I was like, dude, I'm like, come here. And he's like, oh, man, I got slammed on this part of the ring outside of the ring last night and it punctured me. And I go, there's a piece of material still sticking out there's a piece of material still sticking out of you, bro. I pulled out this little piece of material. I'm like, we got to go to the hospital. Like right now, this could you could get an infection from this or anything. Right. And he was like, okay, I guess so.
Anything for the company.
He would rather go to practice. He was ready to like do MMA. He was like, that kind of like his. Let's say something about Kurt right now. His mental concentration abilities and his like mental drive and dedication is like deeper than just about anybody I ever came in contact.
Really?
Oh my God, he's just a
love
machine.
To get him
I
on
like
the show.
Worship him.
I'd love to get him on the show.
I'm telling you, you would not be disappointed. He is just he's the nicest guy in the world too. Not to
No, it's okay.
blow Kurt any more than I have to, but I love him. I think he's just the nicest person. Like he's mama's boy, just like you just want to hug him. He's just the kindest person.
You know what I felt too? I remember after the Olympics, was it '96? And he tried the broadcasting thing here, and it didn't work. He just it wasn't him. And I'm like, wow, what is he gonna do? Because obviously the broadcasting thing and it just wasn't working for him. And I was one of the few people that actually was happy for him when I saw he went to the WWF at that time, WWF. And a lot of people were like, oh, we don't want to see him go to studio wrestling and da-da-da. Look at the career he made for himself.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah,
it was the king.
It was the right decision. Absolutely the right decision.
It's the same thing. People had a tough time with him being an Olympic champion, doing real wrestling to make they didn't understand like the entertainment value and the like he was already such a giant, like,
it's a pride of Pittsburgh.
Yeah, the pride of the country. He represented our country.
No question. But especially here in town. I mean, he was their son, Pittsburgh's son.
Yeah, I mean his whole makeup of everything about him. When he would turn that to professional wrestling, I think people thought it was like a step backwards in his like legitimacy or something like that. Meanwhile,
I never saw it that way.
He learned all new. He learned how to act, how to do like I call it full contact stage acting. He learned full contact stage acting at the highest level and became the king of it.
No doubt.
What do you expect? Like he would have did that no matter what he did, because that's just the kind of person he is. He he would have excelled. It might have seemed bleak or whatever, but Kurt's he's a superstar.
I never viewed it as bleak at all, as an opportunity, and I think he would have been very foolish not to take that opportunity.
I think he would have been too.
Yeah, there's no question. So back to your story here. I want to know how the whole Pittsburgh Fight Club actually started in its infancy before it was an actual thing. How'd that evolve for you?
Well, I used to have all these guys come over and train, and when they started doing the Ultimate Fighting Championships, I started to stray away from conventional training of, martial arts that had to do with defending yourself and learning, certain individual skills and so forth. And I started to try to attract athletes to come over to fight. And
Were you working out of your house at that time?
I was working out of my garage, a 2-car garage, and I would lift open the garage doors, and the neighbors would come and set chairs up across the street. And I had the whole back of my gym was mirrored, so you could see both sides of everything. And we'd have 2 guys going at a time, and we would have fights. We call them Tuesday night fights, all night long. And we had rules. You weren't allowed to stay in the garage after you fight because you could get heat exhaustion really easy. So you had to leave. You had to stand outside. There was limited coaching. I fought everybody that came into the gym first in case we had any kind of rogue psychopath or whatever would show up. I would make sure that I could kick the crap out of anybody that came there. And then my guys were like a wolf pack. If we didn't have anybody that would show up to fight, because we'd go out to bars and stuff and invite people to try to get them to come over to fight to see if they were tough or whatever, we would just beat each other up. and we beat each other up every day of the week. Every day there was guys coming over and fighting and training in my garage, so that eventually I had a promoter call me and asked me to come to Wheeling and fill in, like I said.
Right.
And we did well, and then we were able to be...
So you had your own fight club, even though it was out of a garage at the time.
Yeah, and I didn't call it Pittsburgh Fight Club. At that time, it was called Practical Fighting Concepts.
Okay.
The circuit, all the guys, all the fighters on the circuit called us the Pittsburgh Fight Club because they didn't know
They adopted
us from
that
Adam.
name for you then.
Yeah, they just projected it onto me, and then when I opened my commercial place down on Campbell's Run Road, I just took that name and ran with it.
So you're having these fights in your garage for the neighborhood folk or anyone else that wants to come. How long did that go on? And was the township, were they okay with that? Did you get any grief from anybody?
No, you know what? My block was super supportive of me.
That's very cool.
I used to run all my fighters around the block, and there was a huge hill called Sheldon Hill that was about maybe half a mile, maybe like a half a mile long, like this. I mean, just like a mountain. I used to run guys up that. Everybody would cheer us all the way around the block. Then we'd go up to the park and do all kinds of training in the park, and everybody would, give us the high sign at the park, and everybody knew me from the neighborhood, and it was very comfortable, and I stayed there for a long time,
right?
And didn't go anywhere else because it was very homey. You had everything I needed right there, and it was just comfortable for me. And
you guys train every day?
Oh yeah,
every day.
I trained several times a day, as much as my body could possibly take. I just tried to push it.
How many bones have you broken?
Really, I haven't done anything. What happened to me that was severe was I had brain damage. I had a stroke when I was 22 years old.
Really?
And I have a huge scar that runs down the middle of my brain, which I still have seizures to this day, which really kept me from going into having a professional, when it came down to it, it was do I want to fight mixed martial arts and risk, not being able to
function,
eat my soup.
Right.
And what would happen was I would go into shock, or into they called it a Jacksonian seizure. I'd have a seizure. I'd get into a fetal position. My tongue would fall out of my mouth. My whole body would shake, and then it would my consciousness would work down to a little tiny dot, which I refused to give into because it wanted to go black. and I would just like fight to hold that there. But when I had multiple concussions and hardcore sparring like for 20 years, it was just, you know, I was in my late 30s when I started fighting, doing Ultimate Fighting. So it was more of a privilege for me to be there, to be around my idols, to bring up guys that were I had some mega talented like fighters that came to my gym that could.
Right.
I mean, they were just. I would say a couple names like Don Caker. He runs a mixed martial arts school. Mark Schrader runs Mark Schrader's mixed martial arts. He was a heck of a. His hands were just ridiculous. He's the most skillful puncher I ever came in contact with. He's really good. Bill Vusick. Raised him from when I used to pick him up when he was like 18 years old, take him to practice, train the crap out of him all day long, and then drive him home, you know, at the end of the day. And then I put him in the cage against his first fight was against the Cuban world champion. And this was massive gorilla, like him walking down the ramp, and we were in where were we? Oh my God. Oh, I can't remember. We were in some massive venue, and on the other side of the cage was Mario Yamasaki, the guy that always makes the heart. He's a referee, always makes the heart or whatever. Mm-hmm. He was the other team's the head of the other team, and my team was on this side, and Billy was only he was a young kid, and maybe 19 years old, and this guy comes down the ramp, and he like looks at me, and he's like, oh dude, I don't know. I go, I'm like, holy shit, Bill, I wouldn't want to be you. And he like look at me like, what do you mean? I'm like, go over there and punch that dude in the mouth and show him what is up. Show him that people from Pittsburgh, I don't give a crap where he came from. And this guy was super overconfident, he like a world champion. And he came walking down the thing, caught into the cage with Billy, and then Billy beat the shit out of him. You know, landing nice leg kicks, nice punches, took him down on the ground. And Billy made a show of it at the same time. And his heart and his determination and his ability to go full bore, you know, in that situation was just
at that
super
young age,
admirable.
too.
It made me, like, you know, my heart like explode. I was like, wow, I can inspire these other guys to do this too. It's not just all on me. It's not, you know, just me doing it. They can do it too. And then somebody approached me, I don't know, like so many years after that, and said, you know, you're like this talented guy, and you're in your garage. Like, what are you doing? Like, don't you want to have more exposure? Don't you want to have a place where you can attract like way more people and have the tools at your disposal that you'd like to have? And don't you have any ideas on how you would like to scale a gym? And I was like, are you saying you have money? Because I don't have any. I just get the crap beat out of me because I like it a lot, you know. And he was like, well, I have a little bit of money, but I think we could, you know, go around and talk to a bunch of other people, and then maybe, you know, we could get the kind of money you would need. What kind of equipment would you need? And then I just laid out like a list of everything I would want if I had my dream gym. And I'm like, the problem is I've looked for years. I tried to find a place that I could afford, that would have enough space, that would have the right like layout so that I could do the things that I want. Because I needed big empty space.
Yeah, like compartments then with inside the.
Well, no, I needed a warehouse, but it couldn't be. It couldn't be a warehouse. It had to be warehouse-sized space without it being a warehouse, because I have massive allergies, and I couldn't like survive all the dirt and dust and so forth. It would give me migraines, and I wouldn't be able to function. So when we found the place we found, by the time we were done with that place was immaculate. You could eat off the floor.
And this is down on Campbell's Run Road in Galveston Township.
When you walked in the door of my place, it was like, it looked like a scary junkyard outside or something, you know, so it was kind of, you know, a little bit hairy. But when you opened the door, it was like the angels were singing, oh, You know, I mean, it was beautiful. That gym was just, it was spotless.
Top
I had
notch.
a full 20-foot cage in there. I had a 20-foot ring. I had a 90-foot jiu-jitsu deck and mat. I had a bag forest full of all kinds of tie bags and different types of heavy bags. And I had some innovations too. Like I had bags on big 150-pound bags that were on like pulleys, not pulleys, but like a track. They could slide back and forth. So the bag, you could move around the mat and hit the bag, and it moved with you, which was really cool because that's like a real,
great,
like a real person. And then all the bags, I made sure that they all weren't like, everybody always takes their bags and sticks them against the wall, and then people work like a
I noticed that. Why is that?
Because they're dumb.
Is it space related or
yeah, they're trying to utilize the spaces best. You don't want the bags in the way when you need open floor space to do different things. What I did was I hung all my bags, away from the walls in the middle of the floor, so you could have a 6-foot circle around each bag. And then I had like 20-some bags like all next to each other, and I could run classes where everybody could fully work. I could work their footwork around the bags. I could make them realize that there was angulation and different types of ranges and so forth, and all the bags could swing like fully. Cool. So there was it was like you were fighting a live person.
Yeah, it's very cool.
I was a smart guy.
Yeah. All right. So, what year did you open?
Like
officially
2005.
Okay.
We opened up in the spring of 2005.
Yeah, I remember seeing the sign. I'm going Fight Club, and it was funny because there was a movie called Fight Club that came out a couple years prior to that. Was that
which
right?
Really made it hard for me in the beginning too.
I bet,
because everybody that's like, we had our
weird connotation, right? It was a
they assumed that's what went on there, and like they would come down.
I think I did in the beginning.
Everybody did. Like when I had my grand opening, I had all these people come down and sort of like look around the gym, and I gave like a demonstration of everything that we were doing and how it was organized, and they were just looking at me like, wow, what is this? Like, what are you doing?
It's a full-scale gym-style operation going on.
Yeah, I think...
It wasn't some seedy room in the back where people were betting like 50s and 100s, right?
Well, the types of people that showed up to train, though, in the beginning, were Fight Club guys that thought that's how it was going to be. Like, I'd have guys come down. It was me, and I had 2 other 150-pound guys were my instructors. And they're like, we're here to fight. And I'd be like, go sit on the ring, because everybody had to sit along the ring in order to get into the cage. And I go, and we'll take turns. And then I would just ceremoniously or unceremoniously beat the crap out of whoever. I don't give a shit how big you were, how tough you thought you were, where you came from, whatever. I'm like, I'm fighting the best professional fighters that I can find. Like when I first started, I didn't have no kids, like period. Like there was nobody under 18.
18. But
eventually, like they wore me down. Like the kids would come in and they would, like, as soon as the internet like exploded, they would know like all the fighters, they would know like all the statistics, they would know like everything that was going on, and they'd come in and they'd sit there and they'd stare, and come inside the club. We had like tables and chairs and stuff that they could sit in, people could sit in to learn about the club basically and view what was going on, and it just got to be to the point where it was, okay, we'll take 17-year-old, okay, we'll take 16, okay, we'll take 15. I'm not going any lower than 15. That's it. Right. And then there's this 14-year-old kid. He's really good and he wants to fight and he's willing to. So then I'd be like,
and the parents obviously have to be okay with it at that time.
Oh yeah. Actually, the parents would come in and they'd be like, "Can you help my son?" It could be anything from he's a heroin addict to he's a disciplinary problem.
Getting bullied, maybe?
Yeah, it could be. It could be anything. And were their concerns where they didn't feel like there was anywhere to take them to solve these problems, and there wasn't anybody to mentor them. So I just mentored, kids with no father. Their parents were, divorced, or same thing that most martial arts places go through now. It's the same thing there. There was just a hardcore edge all the time because we were training to fight, and I was trying to get people, I was trying to push people too. Like even in my basic class, if you came to my basic entry-level class. I called it the 5:30 class. You come to my 5:30 class, I expected you to work. And when you came in, like a drill sergeant, I pushed everybody to go past their limit. And in 6 weeks, I'd say in 6 weeks, you can test and you can move into the actual fight club. Or you can realize that you suck and you need to do this again. And you'll just keep repeating this 5:30 class. And even my fighters took the 5:30 class just to stay in shape because it was so grueling, to come in and go through it. And it was fun. I mean, I tried to make it as exciting, and I'd have like 50 people at a time training stuffed into this place. And, it was very challenging, but we tried to have an atmosphere of gung-ho-ness so that everybody would get something out of it. And I ended up, capturing, which I later learned is the business. I ended up capturing more and more regular people that wanted to try really hard but didn't necessarily want to go into competition. They wanted to become support network, or they wanted to say that they were training. To this day, I still have guys will come up to me and they'll be like, I trained at the Fight Club and da-da-da. And I'll be like, what's your name, or who are you? Oh, well, you don't know me. I was there and then I was gone or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, how long were you? Well, I was there for 6 months. And I'm like, well, what program were you in? Well, I was, and then it's, I'm like, dude, this is how it worked.
Right.
If you were there, I'd remember you.
Right.
Okay. And honestly, everybody was there had to really. And I'm not saying that I had women, I had middle-aged people. I mean, I had every, genre that you could imagine of types of people coming in there and training. And it was all about prove yourself, not only to me, but prove yourself to yourself. That was the key. That's why when the guys that came in that made Warrior, they were traveling.
The movie.
Yeah, they traveled around the country and to Canada. And they came to my place, and they came in and they started talking to me and asked me, they were like, wow, this place is incredible. How did you come up with this idea? And then I explained to them, what my ideals were and what my passions were and so forth. And they were inspired. They were like, wow, you're like Rocky. Your attitude is Rocky-esque or whatever, and this is going to make a perfect background for this mixed martial arts movie we want to make. And at the time, I didn't have any idea what they were talking about or anything else. I was just telling them, I put this place together so I could develop people, so I could inspire people, so that I could possibly get a piece of this new sport that I know is going to, just out of the sheer excitement, it's going to catch on.
Right.
Sooner or later it's going to catch on, and it did. There wasn't even companies to support me with equipment when I started.
Really?
No, there was nothing. I built the cage. We ordered a boxing ring. So that was the only thing we could get, was a boxing ring.
That's it.
And they didn't have pads or bags or anything that would suffice. I built.
So the sport wasn't established enough yet, just from a
to have
manufacturing standpoint.
To have companies support it.
Wow.
And then just about that time, luckily, the Ultimate Fighter came on TV, where they started to take fighters. And as soon as they did that, boom, these companies came out of the woodwork, and all of a sudden, right before I opened, literally, there was just all of a sudden I could order some equipment that I wanted, and I got the place, fixed up the way that I needed it to be, with pads and bags and shin pads and the right kind of gloves. Everything all of a sudden became available right at the last second, and it saved me, because I would have been I was using old boxing equipment, old bag gloves, and I was using anything I could do to fudge my way through the equipment that we were lacking.
Sure.
Unbelievably. But as soon as that happened, things got a lot easier, and I had the equipment that I needed, had the tools that I needed to be able to put together really quality programming that, and I tried different types of things too. I mean, I went through stages where, like in the beginning, when we were just beating up anybody that came into the club that didn't understand that there's a order of things that has to be followed. And I don't care how tough you are in your neighborhood. Now you're at the Fight Club and everybody's tough, and and it's about getting along and working together more than it is trying to kill each other. But if you want to go that route, we could start out that way, and you could go the way of pain.
Teach them a lesson.
Yeah, you teach them a lesson, and then the ones that stuck, well, then they were somebody worth having, and they were something to somebody to keep. Most of the guys that quit and left, they didn't have what it took anyhow. They just mentally were deluded and thought that they were all that because they could beat up a drunk guy outside the bar or whatever, blah, blah. And it didn't have anything to do with athleticism or sportsmanship or real anything like character. Like, there's no character.
Did you have people coming from other disciplines, or maybe a one discipline circumstance, and they got their taekwondo black belt, and they try to migrate because they think it's just a natural progression, or that they can do that? They look at it, I can do that, and then they were like immediately, it's a whole different level.
When
am I
you
right?
come in, I'll just tell you this: when you come in, I had lots of different guys come in. They would see us fighting in the cage inside the club, and you could see people's like color go out of their faces.
So they weren't there long, they left.
Well, some people were like intrigued and wanted to learn what the process was, and other people just like straight up were like, "You're nuts," and left. But that's fine, because I wasn't trying to be like everybody else.
You weren't for everybody.
No, I was trying to be a pioneer. I was trying to move into the unknown and try to, it's kind of a weird way to say that. I was just trying to do things real. I just wanted to be real. I don't want to make excuses. I don't want to give people a bunch of like paperwork and tell them that, here's where you're going to be in this amount of time, blah, blah, blah. I was like, you come in here and you earn it, and you work. And then when you're done earning it and working, then we earn it some more and we work some more, and like that's how it goes. And it's a systematic breakdown of how to survive that and how to push your own personal limits so that you can get the most out of yourself that you can, because that's what I'm into. That's what I do. That's what I expect out of myself. So if you want to come here and hang, then that's what you do.
So that Warrior movie, though, were you contacted by Hollywood? Was it how did that they just walk in one day?
No, they just walked in. They walked in. They said,
and they didn't know where they were going to film yet, right? What city it was. Did they film in Pittsburgh once they wanted to make your place the training spot, or how'd that work?
Yeah, there was two reasds. One was they got a tax break. Okay. Pittsburgh was offering a tax break.
Pittsburgh Film Commission.
Yeah, which at the time they were having a lot of different they've had a lot of problems. They had a lot of problems attracting people. But as soon as they did that, then people were interested. And then I had a recommendation from Eric Paulson in California, because they had gone to his gym.
Okay.
And he has a beautiful gym too. And he said, they said, well, we're going to TriStar Gym in Canada where GSP trains, George St. Pierre. We're going to go up there and see what his gym's like. And then they came to my place next, right after that, because they told me how spectacular it was up there. But my place was really cool, though. Like the way that I put my place together, the way it was, the colors, it was like a interior design. I hired an interior design girl, to come in and help me work with the color schemes that I was going to be working with and how to make it attractive. So like I said, when you opened the door, it wasn't just because there was a bunch of stuff in a basement. It was really put together sweet, and it was
How many square feet did you have?
Total, I had a 9,500 square feet.
That is huge.
But our actual bay was only 5,400 square feet. So we had, the front bay was 5,400 square feet. I had a private training room too, which we used for filming. Like we did promotions and stuff like that back there. I had a massage room and some private training equipment and stuff that I did private training sessions with different. In the beginning, I pretty much that's how I stayed in business. My private training like kept the place afloat because I was still trying to figure out the programming, still trying to figure out how to make money out of the sales and advertising and so forth. This was before the internet.
So that would be a little tough too because it was such an edgy concept,
media.
Right? It was edgy concept.
You think?
Well, yeah. I mean, I was one of those people that drove by and go, "That's kind of crazy." Because again, that movie was out then, so there was that natural.
People thought
the movie was Fight Club, right?
They thought, some people wanted it to be that way too. They wanted to shoot.
Until you taught them a lesson.
They wanted to shoot video after hours and stuff like that, and hold just kind of like burner fights and stuff at night. And I squashed all that. I'm like, we're never going to get accepted publicly if we do that. If the word gets around that that's what we do, I mean, believe me, it was hard enough on me as it was, just the way it was.
I bet.
Let alone what it could have like turned into if I'd have let it go that way. I just was like an iron grip on. I had my vision and I wanted it to go through that way.
So when the Warriors cast came down and trained with you, it included Tom Hardy, am I right?
Yeah, Tommy was great.
Yeah, I saw many pictures of him there.
I just recently started talking to him again too on Instagram. Like Instagram's like the coolest thing.
It is, huh?
Yeah, Nick Diaz was like liked some of my stuff, and I was talking to him, and then he's a fan. I don't know if you know who Nick Diaz is, but
I know he is.
Pretty famous mixed martial arts bad guy. And then Khabib Nurmagomedov, he's the weight champion that beat up Conor McGregor. He just started talking to me on Instagram, and I'm like, wow, this is super cool.
The world's a lot smaller now.
I get to talk to like all these like ex world champions. And
what's crazy though is had social media been around during that, you might have had an unbelievable avenue toward additional success then had it been around.
I think,
at the time.
Honestly, my neighbor Nancy said this to me. She said one day, she said, Eric, aren't you disappointed in the fact that now everything is so readily accepted and everything is so like, mainstream, and when you were back there trying to suffer it out by yourself, having all this, vision of how you thought it could be, and then you still didn't have social media, you didn't have like public acceptance, you didn't have these things. And I think I was so close to just catching it right on the right thing.
You couldn't have predicted that though. That was a societal thing. All
my energy that I had at that time, if I had that energy now.
Funny how that happens with age.
I could have done a lot more.
You're still in amazing shape, though, my friend.
Well, I try to keep up. I mean, for a man, I'm a 55-year-old man now, but I'm still. I mean, I still got it. I mean, I can still put it together.
Yeah, there's no question. There's no question. So, what year did you end it? Now, how did it end down there? Was it a flood that you guys had?
Well, yeah, there was a. I'll give you a real quick story.
Sure.
This is how it went down, and this is unbelievable. I'm with my buddy Sean McCalla, where he worked for a carpet cleaning company, and he came in, and we were revamping the Fight Club because it was June 10th, and we were getting ready for this whole new programming set that I was implementing, which involved kids training and a whole bunch of other things.
What year was this? Do you remember?
This was 2010.
Okay.
June 10th, 2010. And there was a storm. Like it started to rain. And we're in there cleaning he had his carpet machine, like this truck with this big pipe coming in the door. The whole place looked like brand new. It looked like a brand new club when we were done. And I was so happy. And we just got done. It was like 5 o'clock. We'd been there all day since early in the morning, like 6 o'clock in the morning. We were working all day. I hear this crack, like this unbelievable crack of lightning. And I was like, oh, it must really be getting, the lights flickered a little bit. And I'm like, oh, it must be getting really bad. I opened the door of the Fight Club, and I kid you not, there was a wall of water coming across the parking lot at like 30 miles an hour, like 5 feet high, with cars and everything.
That is insane.
And I was like, this is so funny too, because Sean was right behind me. And I turned around and I looked at him and I slammed the door and I'm like, holy shit, dude. And as soon as I said that, the water hit the building and it blew the front door open, which picked me. There was a bench that was made out of oak that weighed like, it was 12 feet long, and it weighed, I don't know, like a couple 100 pounds. It picked me and the bench up and Sean and everything and just launched us all the way across the gym and just ripped through my garage door. I had a giant garage door, a two-story garage door. Blew that door through, blew through my back wall of the pro shop. I had a pro shop right next to it, a really nice pro shop. Blew through the pro shop, blew into the locker rooms. The water shot through the drainage pipe up underneath my deck. My giant 90-foot square jiu-jitsu deck, slammed it against the ceiling and dropped it back down on the floor, and everything was inundated in just like seconds.
That is crazy.
My wife was in my kitchen, which was in the back of the club, and it was submerged, and the door, she was in there up on top of the counter, trying to hide from the amount of water, not having any idea. She couldn't get out. The door was forced shut because there was so much water pressure against it. It went through the back of the club and blew out the wall in the guy next door's place and continued down. My dumpster washed away. Cars in the parking lot washed away. I got in my wife's car, and it was underwater, submerged, and moving like this, like being dragged, and I put it in reverse and punched it, and it somehow caught on a piece of something, and I got just the ass end of it out of the way, and I backed it up the hill, and then just watched everything go down the creek, like everything. There was a huge suck right after it was a huge suck when it happened.
Yeah, I bet.
But there was a huge suck right after it happened, and it sucked out all my equipment. All my computers, my everything, all my office equipment, everything was just sucked out and then gone forever. Gone. Everything gone. No, we didn't have insurance.
In like 20 seconds or something, or 30 a minute, it was all done.
Yeah, like my whole life and every penny I ever had, everything I ever worked for was gone in 20 minutes. It was just like gone. And it was, I can't even tell you, I was in shock. I mean, I was like literally in shock. Like I couldn't understand how we could have worked and had it to perfection, ready to go back into action. Like it was a Sunday, and it was Monday, morning. We were going to have this new, attack plan, and then it just got annihilated, like in a split second, like everything, just soaked. And
was it raining quite a bit before that? I mean, was it?
Well, here's what happened. Okay, they put that Settlers Ridge Mall in, I don't know, something like 280,000 square feet of concrete or blacktop with no drainage. They had a reservoir pool the size of a regular swimming pool in somebody's backyard. That was their reservoir. They had the buildings up on the side of the mountain next to
Campbell's
me.
Run.
Was the Carpenters Union and something else. They had stripped off all the trees because they were making room for new buildings to be put up there.
Right.
So there's nothing to stop the water from running down the hill. There was all the water that came down naturally from the creek, okay, from the other side of the street, because there was 3 creeks that came together down there, and I was right at the
precipice
apex of everything. yeah. And when it came through there, there was nothing to stop the water, and the water just, I mean, it was unbelievable.
I can't imagine.
It was horrifying.
It's the emotional shock of it. Yeah, the emotional shock of it.
And then there was no way. I went to meetings, and the borough and the city and everybody, the Settlers Ridge had lawyers come in, and like they planned in case anything like this would happen, that how they would just shut you down and shut you up and snuff you off. And,
Right.
And there was nothing I could do about it. There was just, it just knocked all the wind out of my sails.
I bet. How could it not?
I worked when I worked and I built that place. When I put that place together, I was working I'm talking 15-hour days, 6-7 days a week. There's no break for me ever, because I was the everything. I'm the main trainer. I'm the the coach. I'm the janitor. I'm the marketing guy. I'm the salesman. I'm like everything. I'm every single guy. And it took every single ounce of every bit of energy in me to maintain that and to keep it going. And then to have it just have your legs cut out from under you like that.
Wow.
It was some hard.
Ooh, I bet. So that you're obviously done. You clean out the building, or they scrapped everything?
It took me 3 months. I salvaged everything that I could. You have to understand that it was all sewer water.
Yeah.
So anything.
It ruins everything.
Yeah, everything. The mats were giant sponges. The bags are, they're filled with material, and everything was soaked with all this crap, and and it stunk, and I brought in special cleaning, solvents and crews, and I worked on it for 3 months out, laying stuff out in the sun and stuff like that. And and there's, believe me, it's a lot more complicated than I'm willing to go into.
Well, no, I understand.
But at the same time, it was just devastating.
I can't imagine.
In every way.
I can't imagine.
And it made me think too, everything I went through to get to where I was great, but I wasn't about to go repeat that. At that point I was I think I'm done. I think I'm going to try to evolve. Because that's always been my thing, is evolve. I thought the club would give me a platform in order to evolve even further, from that point on. And once that was wiped away, I was I got to start all over. I got to reinvent myself. But first I have to go into the mountains and travel the earth.
What'd you do?
I went into the mountains and traveled the earth. I literally rode my bike in the mountains. A bunch of people wanted to train with me, but I just couldn't
get there.
I just couldn't mentally. I just wasn't into it. I was okay, I don't think you understand. My into itness is gone. It left. I did all this for nothing. And that's just how you look at it. You're looking through a straw.
No question.
Oh man, how could I get a bad break like this after I broke my ass? But that's life. That's how it is. You have to grow up and you have to continue on. And I had to do a lot of soul searching, and I had to.
Your motorcycle.
No, a bicycle.
You rode a bicycle.
I was a bike freak.
Okay.
I used to just ride the bike trails. I'd rip off 30 miles at a crack. So
you loved it.
Well, I needed it because I couldn't hit anybody anymore. I couldn't do the things that I'm just were just intrinsically woven into my being. I couldn't do those things. Especially at that level or anything, I wasn't right for a while. I needed to wander the earth. That's what I needed to do.
So you rode the bike every day?
Yeah, pretty much like a psychopath. I rode my bike, and I did private training still, but it was
unfulfilling probably, and based upon what you just lost.
The only redeeming thing was I trained a little girl named Jenna Baldwin, who was my just super confidant, and she helped me train when the Fight Club was roaring, and she helped with the cleanup after it was over. And she said she thought she might like to fight, and she was highly talented and very skillful and super tough, super tough. And she said, you know, do you think I could try doing it? And I said, well, you know, let's see what you have. And then I trained her for a while, and then we started taking fights, and then she was just like phenomenal. I mean, she had mad skills. She was a showman. She was a world champion cheerleading coach and competitor, and she grew up in a household with a lot of siblings, so she was just rock hard, super tough, and she impressed me like immensely, because it was just me and her going out, going from like fight to fight, and finding fights for her. And at one point, I couldn't even get a fight for her.
Really?
She had 26 girls in a row. I'm going to say this bitch out. Once they got wind of like how tough
her skill level,
like, they didn't want to have anything to do with her, and she even fought a girl who was the top of her division, top of her in the country, and this girl had like 15 fights, and Jenna had 1 or 2. And they went to war out in Ohio, and they had the most epic fight. Steve Mazzagatti, who's a famous referee of ill repute, was the referee, and Jenna had her nose broken in the first round, you know, and she's bleeding out of her nose, and I'm like panicking. I'm like, oh my God, you know. I go into the cage, and Steve Mazzagatti grabs me and says, don't stop this fight. Don't stop this fight. No matter what happens, he goes, that girl earned it in that first round. She's incredible. You know, don't stop the fight. So I walked over to Jenna, and I looked at her, and I said, you know, are you okay? And she was like, you tell me how to go back out there and beat the crap out of her right now. Like, that was her attitude. And I was so shocked that she was...
that competitive.
Yeah, she was that fired up to go back out and fight. And, you know, I gave her some quick instructions or whatever, and she went back out and finished the fight. She didn't win, but she didn't get submitted. She didn't get, you know, knocked out. She didn't get, it was pretty even, you know, and it was a knockdown, drag-out fist fight, and it was great. And the whole crowd just went ape shit over it.
Right.
You know, and I think it was only her third fight, and then we won 2 titles after that.
Wow.
She won one down, another one out in Ohio in the sticks. Where, like, it's funny when you're from Pittsburgh and you go to the depths of Ohio to fight. When they announce you from Pittsburgh, it's like,
I'm not surprised.
yeah, it's like there's a lot of, like, you know, hatred going on there.
Sure.
But, you know, it didn't matter. She went out and she kicked ass, and she was incredible. And then we came back to Pittsburgh, and she had her own adversities too. She had lost her place to live, and she had all kinds of, like, things happening to her. And I took her downtown, and she went over to the north side, and they had what's the name? American Eagle, wherever American Eagle is. I think it's on the north side. We went over to American Eagle, and she fought a world title match over there, and she won. And I was never so proud. Like, at that point, I was like, oh, you know, like, everything's not the way I think it is.
It gave you perspective, probably.
Yeah, I was like, wake up, you pansy, you know, like, everything about you is weak. Like, come on, you know, where's your creativity?
We all go through periods of that, wouldn't you agree? I mean, in our life, we feel sorry for ourselves. Hopefully it doesn't last long. We've all had it. I've had it.
Well, mine was worse than feeling sorry for myself. I felt like I don't know, like somebody owed me and didn't pay up or something. Like, that's what I felt.
So you had a chip
like.
on your shoulder.
As soon as she won that, though, then I was like, oh, wow, I'm a baby, and, you know, she deserves this, and, you know, like, this type of work ethic, and this, you know, I can still admire that. I don't have to, like, stay away from it. There's still a lot to be gained. It doesn't have anything to do with whether I run the Fight Club or whether I'm a mixed martial arts, like, you know, proponent or anything else. It just made me feel better about it, and I'm beholden to her for that, for real. I mean, it really made me okay again.
Kind of brought you back, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And how many years ago was that when she won that fight?
I think it was like 2015 maybe, or 2014. I'm not.
It's okay.
Like I said, I got hit in the head a lot. I'm not really that sharp on time periods.
I don't know. You've done pretty well tonight, though.
I'm trying.
So you still private training? I mean, what's your life look like today? I know you've got a couple different projects going on too.
Well, now I used to be Hib Fights, but now I'm Hib Flows.
Mm-hmm.
So everything is flow oriented. I started a new martial fitness company called Hammer Flow.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Which is what it is which I brought in.
I see that.
A couple of
which is great for our video audience here.
For hammers. Now, what these are?
Oh, they got a little bit of weight to them.
These are Deadblow sledgehammers, and I've been interested in training martial arts weapons just as much as I was without weapons. If you look at my Instagram or something, I mean, you'll see me. I'm on there with sticks, and I'm on there with knives, and I'm on there with hammers. I saw quite a few in
the last 2 weeks here.
Well, like to me, like my fitness, my martial fitness has always been my first priority. Like I was never interested in anything that didn't somehow involve some type of martial aspect to it. So I used to train with machetes all the time, and because I didn't have a sword.
Okay.
So I had machetes, and machetes are nose heavy if they're good. Okay. They're a nose heavy weapon, and I did that for, I don't know, 30 years or something. Fooled around with all different types of sticks and knives and bladed edged weapons is what they call them. And I cut myself. You can see this scar.
Yeah.
I cut myself and almost cut my arm off. And I thought, a smart guy, okay, would either train with a blunt weapon, okay, because I never trained blunt. I never liked blunt training. I always like to have a live weapon just in case. If I cut myself too bad for me, learn your lesson and don't cut yourself. Learn to be better at it. But then I started thinking, I can't have a regimented program without some type of scaling to go along with it. And I went to the hardware store and I looked around in the hardware store and I'm like, what can I get an axe, or what can I do that can give me graduated weight? And then I looked over and I saw this and I was like, oh man, is this freaking cool. And a Deadblow sledgehammer, what it is it's a steel hammer encased in polyurethane, okay, with steel shot in the head. And it's used for farming or construction when you don't want to bruise the material that you're hammering. Like if I wanted to hammer a nail in and I didn't want to mar the surface. In farming, it's for gas. If you hit something and cause a spark, you don't have a job or a life after that.
Right.
It's game over.
Right.
So this shot inside focuses the strike, but it also can develop rhythm and tempo. So I thought, wow, they come in 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4-pound weights. There's my graduation.
What are these, 4s?
These are 3s.
Oh, 3s.
They come in graduated weights, so I could literally jump back and forth with different weights and train different aspects of my grip endurance, of my balance, of my ability to be fluid with the added aspect of the weight in the head shifting back and forth.
Right.
And I started to look into using these to replace my machete training and edge weapons training, and found them to be just the coolest thing to work with. And I thought, I can build a whole fitness system based around these hammers. And I think that this is the smartest thing I ever came up with. And
necessity's the mother of invention, right?
Yeah, and then me being enthusiastic again, I had a massive creativity dump. Like about 2-3 years, I think it's three years ago. I had a massive creativity dump. And all of a sudden, it was just like somebody lit the fire again, and I was like, "Oh my God, I can go sick with these hammers. There's a million different things I can do with them." And I started to really explore the physics involved, and then the hammer's a simple machine, and why is a hammer the way it is, and why is it so it's very easy. Like when you pick up the hammer, it's natural for you to want to grip the hammer. Mm-hmm. Anybody could relate to the hammer. And then the hammer had all these different properties that you could learn to benefit from, like angular momentum, which comes from swinging the hammers. You could use these like a more dynamic weight system.
Okay.
And then they related back to my edge weapons again. So I started to play with these hammers. I started to develop different types of exercises that were specific to the dynamics that the hammer gave you.
Right.
And I came up with the system, and now I told my buddy that I went to high school with. He had gotten out of his name's Mike Perella,
mm-hmm.
and he had gotten out of the corporate world where he had been king for 25 years, and he couldn't take it anymore. And I tricked him into doing this with me, and he is just as enthusiastic about it as I am, and I think we really have something. There's a whole flow arts community now, so
it's phenomenal.
It's natural for me to be Hib Flows. I think flow arts are going to be the thing that kind of challenges sport in the future, because everything's based on fluid movement,
mm-hmm.
and instead of competition.
Mm-hmm.
And people can still get all the same physical gains and learn other attributes
same time
that don't require you to be competitive necessarily. Like you can still do competitive things. It's not the nature of it. However, this does give you a way you can work out. You can still practice your flow art, mm-hmm. but you can still do it in a regimented
right.
way where you can expect results that don't necessarily have to do with your talent level, don't necessarily have to do with your the time in that you're willing to put into it
right.
necessarily or only that way. And I just think that there's a lot of value to this, and this is going to be my thing. We're pushing this. I'm looking for investors.
When did you last? When did you launch?
Well, I don't know that we necessarily ever launched yet.
Okay.
Like we're right now, what we've been doing for the last, year or so is trying to look at all the different. We've done a little bit of sports enhancement.
Mm-hmm.
I've done a little bit of martial arts, a little bit of fitness, a little bit of the flow arts, a little bit of each thing. I'm testing and sampling, trying to find the right markets in order to promote this, and and I have to understand social media now too. We want to do everything online. I don't want to be brick
Looks like
and
you're
mortar.
figuring that out.
Oh, it's.
Hey, I'm right in there with you, and I'm told it's a young man's game, right?
No,
but we're learning.
I'm telling you, it's not. I've been on YouTube, I've been on Facebook, and now I'm trying Instagram. It's Hib Flows on Instagram. If you get a chance.
Hib Flows.
And
is the website up at all?
No, we haven't. We're putting our website together now.
Okay.
People keep steering us in different directions, so we have everything ready to go. We just haven't decided how we want to put it out yet.
Okay.
So I'm trying not to step on my own.
No, would it? Let me ask you this: would it appeal to as a additional learning system for martial arts schools?
Well, here's how we're figuring it. One, I can do sports enhancement with this. This is a sports implement. If you want to enhance your grip strength, or
right.
more importantly, your grip endurance. If you want to learn how to transfer your weight properly, if you want to learn proper body mechanics, if you want to learn all the things that are the bases for athleticism, I can develop them through this hammer. You can run with it. I have people walking, like my clients walk, or run sprints, or do plyometrics, or we can do hammer flow exercises, which are exercises that are specific to the hammer flow. You can do them in an athletic situation where you're doing like a HIIT workout or something like that, where it's extreme action over short duration to jack your heart rate up, to build athleticism. So there's
a lot of cardio that goes with this.
Or you can do them the complete opposite. They can be in a very flowing motion where everything, you could stretch it out over. I used to, when I first started doing this, I'd do it for hours on end. Just be flowing, connecting, making movement connections from one thing, so I could endlessly flow. And that way I could drift off in my mind. I could like actively meditate. That's more or less, and develop all my ideas while I'm exercising the entire time. Now, there's different benefits. Like we've even taken this in the water. We do this in the pool.
Yeah.
In the swimming pool, we have all different kinds of ways to work it in the water, where you have the buoyancy of the water to affect the hammers and the resistance of the water in 3 dimensions, and it's super cool, and it's a lot of fun too.
Okay.
And of course, out in track and field, if you do track and field sprinting, if you sprint with hammers, your sprint speed goes through the roof, because you're engaging your upper body, in order to cause your locomotion to be in sync. So there's a lot of benefit to get out of that. Even just general walking, I push my clients to not just go out and take walks, but to go out and take walks and learn the gaits. There's a couple of different gaits that you can swing when you're swinging the hammers and walking that are natural, that you can sort of like amp up or amp down in order to, give you the right amount of exercise challenge that you want to have, and burn different energy systems, burn different types of calorie expenditures.
Sure.
So like it's adjustable. And I have different weights. You can shadow box with these, with the lighter weights, and you can the big 4-pound hammers, which each one of these, like each separation of weight, is exponentially different than the weight that's above it or below it.
I bet.
So all different types of actions can happen with each weight that you work with, and it's a way for you to like express yourself. Rather than going and doing a thing, you're going and exploring yourself. And that's why I think the flow arts are going to end up being, and I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to convince the flow art community that, it's really cool to flow, but it's really cool to work out and flow at the same time, and have it in a systematic fashion, rather than going out and trying to learn moves off of each other and then free expressing only, which is cool. I'm all into the free expression, but I like structure. And then within structure, this is my Bruce Lee training, you have to have freedom within your structure. Can't be caught up in any classical mess where the structure takes over to the point where that's the way it is. That's not the way it is, but you need that framework of understanding to have your bearings, to have your reference points, and then freedom come from that. Then you can see how individually people can develop this, and I'm sure there's going to be people blowing me away once we let this out of the bag and can really promote this. I'm sure there'll be people way better at this and come up with way more interesting things than I do.
Are you in business? I mean, are you actually selling the hammers? Are you selling the technique? What's
now it's just we're doing seminars, and I do private training, and we're gearing up for a launch where we're going to have online training. And we'll have,
that's the future. That's the way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm comfortable without brick and mortar right now, because I haven't had brick and mortar for a while, and I'm trying to twist Jimmy Houck's arm into doing some brick and mortar, maybe. I'm not even sure. Like, really, I want to explore I'm really into Instagram. I just started. I've only been on it for like a month or two, and I'm really into like all the people that I get to talk to and all the different opportunities
it's
there.
a worldwide community.
I got people like all the time, like hey, would you think about coming here and doing that and blah blah blah. So I mean, we're just trying to position ourselves as best we can.
You're on the cusp.
Yeah, I mean, we want to we want to make our own custom hammers. We want to have our programming centralized so that we can do a show every week. Like I would like to be doing my own show, not necessarily like a podcast, but like a show where you can show up and watch me every week and learn whatever we're into that week or whoever we're working with. I like to do work with some of the people that I celebrities I know, some of the mixed martial arts people that I know. I'd like to try to push this in mixed martial arts as a part of mixed martial arts training, and there is certain benefits I think that you can get from this that you can't, you won't be able to get from anything else. I think this is going to be a thing. I think outside the box, and I try to push my limits as much as I can, and I think this is really cool. It really is. It's really cool, and I think that it's really going to take off.
And you believe in it.
Well, I believe in the flow arts community, and I believe that this has a place in it, and I think that it's going to end up being something that people, once they realize that the weight makes all the difference in the world, the fact that you have this rhythm and tempo, you can build rhythm and tempo with this, and you're understand like this is relating like
no
directly
question. On the feel, and there's also an audio component to it too.
Yeah, there most definitely is. When I put on music and work out with these hammers, I can concentrate on rhythm, or I can concentrate on tempo, or I can concentrate on cadence, or I can concentrate on anything that that the hammer, that the Deadblow effect can add to my training, which is not like any other anything.
I've never seen anything like it before.
And the best part is this was designed to be a piece of safety equipment. So I can't even lose. People are like, well, aren't you afraid someone's going to hit somebody with a hammer? And I'm like, well, not any more than somebody's going to hit somebody with a bat. I mean, it's it's the same thing. And by the way, I'm like super into bat workouts too. So just so you know, any kind of club, like period, I'm into stick.
So you
club.
like the bow staff and all that when you were in martial arts,
yeah. Especially the.
Those were my favorite forms, by the way, in my olden days. The bow forms, the staff forms.
That's what all the flash is.
Yeah.
That's all the girls are like, oh, hey.
I remember those days.
So I don't drone on or anything.
No. But you said a very interesting thing too, which is it seems to be the reoccurring theme with every podcast, and we're on number 8 now on the project. Is that so many of my guests so far were told. There were so many naysayers in their life, and they just believed in their thing. And I'm sitting here on the other side, and I got multiple circumstances in my life that I can relate to that, and that's so powerful.
That's been my whole life,
right?
My whole life.
Absolutely.
Everyone's like,
right.
"Why don't you stop doing what you're doing? Why do you do that?" I'm like, I don't know. Like I literally can't shut it off.
Right. It's a passion. It's the passion from within, and it's a reoccurring theme, and I love that. That's why this show exists, because I want to talk to those. Cool. Thank you, man.
It is.
It's just.
I hope you have me on here again sometime.
Without a doubt. No, there's no question.
The begging.
There's no question.
Well, what's the period? When's it start?
There's no begging, man. There's no begging. No, this was great, and like I said, I selfishly have to be interested personally in my guests to do it, because there's nothing more disingenuous than to bring someone on this show that I really am not passionate myself about learning about, and that's why I was so excited to have you in here, because I didn't know a lot about MMA. I was aware of it. I took Tung Sudo for a while, and I had a limited view into it, but to hear your story and to hear how like you've overcome, the peaks and valleys of life, and that your entrepreneurship just keeps pushing you through, and this is the latest thing, and I get that, and so that resonates with me. That passion resonates with me. Plus, I think it's really cool.
When you don't have it, I wondered, like where did it go, and how do people live, like if they don't have it, like if you don't have like to me, it's always been like this little thing inside of me saying, come on, 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 come on. And I can't, I'm like, shh. But I can't shut it down. When it went away, it was like I was naked in the dark, and I was like, oh man, I gotta rethink things.
I think that happens to a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of people that have success in entrepreneurship. I think you go through those peaks and valleys, and oftentimes they're put upon us for things that we couldn't have controlled. Whether it's whether in my case it was divorce and it was a bad economy, kind of simultaneously with the guitar business. With you, it was obviously the you were on the height of really taking your Fight Club to that next level that was envisioned in your brain, and then the flood. So sometimes I think it's obviously things that the outside events in our life sometimes can disrail us for a period of time.
Yeah, and you feel like everything's out of control.
Yeah. I've been there. I think a lot of entrepreneurs have that, but it's the quality of that desire you have inside, I think, that just keeps you going. And,
that's what I hope. I even sat down with my partner and I was like, look, we're in our 50s. We probably have vitality until we're maybe in our 70s. And if we really want to live out the next 20 years of our lives, have to be the best 20 years
God bless
that
you.
we can possibly put together.
God
so we
bless
got to
you.
go for this. We got to like really suck it up and realize like this could be the best time of our life.
Right.
If we are entrepreneurs, if we're disruptors, if we go and shake up the pot, make everybody pay attention to us and listen to us, try to inspire like a new way of looking at things, and then ride it like Laird Hamilton on a giant wave.
There's no tomorrow, man. That's exactly right. And everything you just said, I'm right there. And I think I mentioned to I don't know if it was Fred or if it was James, could have been me, I don't remember, but I said that years ago, and maybe this is how you felt too, but when you're in your 30s and you're looking at your folks and they're usually 20, 25 years older than you, and you see them and they just seem so old, and I'm like, I gotta get my life, it's a long way away, but I gotta get my life together. I gotta start having some fun. And now I remember my father at the age that I am now, and I don't think he was enjoying his life as much as he probably could have. It's just different people, different events, different scenarios.
I saw that in my own father.
Different scenarios, right? And so
sad.
And I'm living as dynamic of a life as I possibly can by choice. And but I will tell you, I repeated this every show. Sorry, my friends, but I believe a lot of the population lives in that quiet desperation, and it's that old Pink Floyd song, and it's a shame because I believe there's so much creativity and there's so much excellence that will never be uncovered in this world because of fear of failure, fear of other people's opinion, sometimes just fear of the unknown. Like I want to do something, but I just don't know how. Almost as if there needs to be an instruction manual, when reality is just do it.
Yeah, that's
right.
That's tough though.
It is
scary.
For
The
a lot
unknown
of people,
scary.
it is. For a lot of people, it is. And even I struggle with it at times. I think we probably all to a degree.
Oh yeah.
But this is an overused cliche. But the good stuff in life is really over the fence of your fear. Over on the other side of the fence.
Right. The only thing holding you back ever is you.
Yeah,
it's really
indecision. Quite frankly, the indecision to do something. But this is great, my friend. I appreciate it. This was really excellent.
Oh, I'm glad you're pleased.
Oh yeah, we want you back for sure.
I
man.
had a great time, and this is super cool.
Yeah. So how can they get in touch with you now? Obviously, it's Instagram. There's Facebook. You're everywhere.
Instagram is going to be the best thing right now because we're going to try to focus on that just because of the exposure. That
it's Hib Flows. HIB as in boy. Hib Flows. Connect with this guy on Facebook, and Instagram, Facebook too, but Instagram immediately.
Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. And
there's 1 minute clips he has up there showing the technique and showing his relentless working out. Makes me even tired watching him.
I'll tell you what, some of the Instagram stuff, I got to be honest with you, it is made to be flashy and I don't know. It's a show. You know what I mean?
Well, sure,
because you only got a minute to catch everybody's attention.
Sure it is.
And everybody, doesn't really know what the heck I'm doing. So I have to be as exciting as I can within a minute's time. I try to cover a bunch of different topics on there too. I want people to feel confident about themselves. I want them to see that they can enjoy like their abilities and so forth and develop them without like anybody else judging them or telling them what's right or wrong. When you come and watch me, I'll make you feel good. Just watching me feel good, watching me gym.
How good is that?
Yeah, I don't think there's any way you can beat it, really.
Well, that's Eric Hibler, a true warrior, at least in my book here. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. It was great. It was awesome.
Thank you.
All right, partner. Good deal.